Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadyasya Yato Anvayaditaratascha Artheshu Abhigyaswarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Muhyanti Yat Suraya Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Svena Sada Nirastakuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi निगमकल्पतरोर् गलितं फलं शुकमुखाद् अमृतद्रव संयुतं पिबत भागवतं रसमालयं मुहुरहो रसिका भुवि भावुकाः. So now we enter the fifth chapter of the seventh Skandha of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are now in the beautiful story of Prahlada. We saw Hiranyakashipu introduced in detail, his extreme demoniac tendencies, his intense austerity, based on which he is become invincible with all kinds of powers ruling earth and heaven, while his son Prahlada is born as the most beautiful devotee of the Lord, completely surrendered, humble, wise, and in mad, ecstatic devotion of the Lord. And therefore, Yudhishthira asks the question, how come Hiranyakashipu wanted to even kill his own son Prahlada? Because that's what Narada told him. So we now go into the story of what happens between Prahlada and Hiranyakashipu. Narada begins, he says, after Prahlada was born and he started to grow up, he was a boy of 4 or 5 years old, just starting his learning, and Hiranyakashipu engaged the sons of his guru, the guru of the demons is Shukracharya. Shukracharya is the um, guru of all the demoniac people, and therefore his sons, who are called Shanda and Amarka, are engaged to teach Prahlada. So they live close to the palace of Hiranyakashipu, and Hiranyakashipu sends Prahlada to their house, which is very close to the palace itself, and there they teach him everything. And Prahlada, who's very young but extremely sharp, and already as we see in this mad devotion, he is just a boy of 5 years old now, and even at this age, he has got such great love, wisdom, devotion, humility, all the saintly qualities. And the reason for this will be known later, how he was endowed with all these great qualities even as a child. Now, here it is said that because he was so intelligent as well, whatever was taught to him, he was able to learn immediately and instantly reproduce, understand, and tell exactly what he was taught. But he also did not approve of it one bit, because everything was based on the false notion of distinguishing one and the other, friend and foe, like and dislike, so on. So, this is the nature of education. This represents the demoniac education, is non different from the regular academic system that is there, and that is what children are put through, where they are taught to compare with each other, grade against each other, and always strive to outperform the other person rather than looking within and realizing one's own potential, and thereby create differences, likes and dislikes, and so on. This is very symbolic of today's education as well. That's exactly what Prahlada was given by the sons of the demons, and Prahlada did not approve of it at all. And then one day, Prahlad was taken back to the palace, and Hiranyakashipu took him on his lap and very lovingly said, "O child, tell me what you regard as good." And Prahlad instantly and most beautifully said, "For all embodied souls, for everyone whose mind is disturbed with the sense of I and mine." So, this is the source of all disturbance, I and mine. It is I am this body, I am this mind, I am these thoughts, and these are mine, these are not mine, and therefore us versus them, causing religious, national, sectarian conflicts. All of these disturbances at all levels, from domestic to international, are rooted in I and mine. So Prahlad says, those whose minds are disturbed by I and mine, the only thing good for them is to take refuge in Sri Hari, the Supreme Being. So right away, Prahlad hits the highest note with Hiranyakashipu. He says, Tat sadhu manye yad harim ashrayeta. And not only that, he says they have to leave all attachment to the home, because that only degrades one's soul, and enter the forest of inner renunciation. That is, to be engaged in total detachment through loving devotion to the Supreme Being Sri Hari. Hari literally means, again, one who takes our heart. So the heart belongs to Hari, the Supreme Being, and if we surrender to Him, He takes the heart and we are situated in the highest plane. So Prahlada says this highest teaching, the very first word spoken by Prahlad is Tat sadhu manye yad harimashrayeta. Whatever is good is only accomplished by surrendering to God. When these words were heard by Hiranyakashipu, he first laughed. Now, this is the first time he is hearing Prahlada. He has sent him to the school, which is next door, and he has come back. And Hiranyakashipu laughs because he still thinks this boy is so young, he is innocent. And he says, "Ah, look at this. Intellect of these young boys are perverted. It looks like there are some devotees of Vishnu who are hiding and they are acting." He says, the may his intellect therefore not be perverted by brahmanas devoted to Vishnu and living incognito at the preceptor's residence. So because, as we saw, he has been sent to the residence of his preceptors, Shanda and Amarka, the sons of Shukracharya. And so Hiranyakashipu laughs off by saying, looks like there are some brahmana boys, because these boys, the sages, Shanda and Amarka, and their father Shukracharya are also brahmanas. And this is why this is again symbolic of the kind of learning that results in helping the demoniac class. That's what they represent. They are highly learned, they are highly scholarly, they are Vedic scholars, they know the scriptures, and yet they use all that learning to teach the demons to maximize pleasures and cause evil activities. So this is what these so-called brahmanas do. And so Hiranyakashipu thinks, among these brahmanas who are supposed to teach my son, looks like there are some hiding who are devoted to Vishnu, because in fact, in truth, that is the true quality of a brahmana, is to be surrendered to the Supreme Being who pervades the whole universe. That's Vishnu. So he says, he just laughs it off, and then he sends him back to the school, which is literally next door, thinking that he will be corrected soon. So, having heard this, the teachers, the priests of the Daityas, that is Shanda and Amarka, they summon Prahlada, and then they talk to him first very sweetly and soft language. They say, "O child Prahlada, may you be well, Bhadram te, speak the truth, do not lie to us. How did you get this perversion of your intellect, which is not found in any of the other boys?" Because they are running a school there where all the demoniac boys are studying. So it is not different from schools of today. All of them are studying, and one rare student is not interested in what they are teaching, not because he is not able to understand. Prahlada completely understands and even can teach them better than what they know, any subject, but yet he sees that all these subjects are completely limited. They only take man into the darkness of ignorance by limiting him to a bodily conception, and therefore Prahlada is not interested. So, whereas all the other boys are interested in that, they are even excelling in that. So, the two teachers are asking him, "Who taught you this?" Because none of the other boys know all this. We don't know of any teachers, because they are terribly afraid of Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu said, "Who is hiding among you teaching all this to my son? Go find out." So they gently ask him, "How did you know? Because we certainly don't teach all this. So how did you get this perversion? Please tell us. We are very anxious to know, how did this aberration come about?" Now Prahlada speaks again, and every time Prahlada speaks, it's pearls falling from his mouth. Each sentence of Prahlada is literally worth the weight in gold and more. So he says right away, I hail only to the Almighty Lord, because it is His Maya that brings about the sense of I and mine, that one is one's own and one is another. And yet, when He is bestowing His grace, then this false sense of I and mine is dissipated. He says, Sa yada anuvrataha pumsam pashubuddhir vibidyate anya yesha tatha anyo aham iti bheda gata sati. That's a very powerful verse. He says, Pashubuddhir vibidyate. Pashu means animal. So people behave like animals by thinking I and mine, being attached to simply sense gratification, breeding, survival instincts, wanting to just mate and have children and protect one's babies and harm others. This kind of animalistic notion of I and mine, this is I, they are others. We see this territorial behavior in dogs, monkeys, chimpanzees, all the animals display such territorial behavior. So he says Pashu Buddhi, this animal buddhi, animal thinking of I and mine, us and them, is there only because of the Maya, the delusive potency, which also comes from the Supreme Lord. But when one surrenders to Him and when He bestows His grace, then this false notion is dispelled. He says, Tasmai Bhagavate Namaha. I offer my obeisances to the Supreme Lord, who is both having the delusive potency of Maya by which I and mine come, and who also bestows grace. Again, as we have seen again and again in this Skandha, both delusion and grace comes from the same Supreme Lord. So when one is caught in delusion, one takes all this to be real, and the very intelligence with which people function in a demoniac way, as Hiranyakashipu to the limit displays, is again coming from the same Supreme Lord, but it results in misery. But on the other hand, when one turns to Him, surrendering to Him, then grace is bestowed. It's like two children given full independence with both possibilities, and whichever possibility one turns towards, that manifests. Therefore, the same Supreme Lord, who has the elusive potency of Maya, when surrendered to Him, one crosses it over. As Krishna says in the Gita, that's why again and again this verse is so important. Daivi Hesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya. He says, my Maya is so powerful and so difficult to overcome. Mamevaye prapadyante maya metam tarantite. But one who surrenders unto me, he crosses over effortlessly. So that's what Prahlada says here. It is his Maya which makes you think like this, like animals. He uses very beautiful and also very strong words that pierce the mind and go to the heart for one who is listening clearly. So, if you want to get rid of this animal instinct and if you want to be free of this, then turn to Him for grace, because He says this Supreme Being cannot be easily comprehended by one who is caught in the notion of I and mine. Even if one has the greatest intellect, even if it is Brahma himself, He says they get bewildered and therefore it is impossible. But when one is bestowed His grace, then automatically his outlook changes. And then Prahlad says, just as iron moves in the vicinity of a magnet without any effort on its own, my mind effortlessly is drawn towards Vishnu because of His grace. Again, this is all very beautiful verses. Yata Brahmyati Ayayo Brahman Swayam Akarshana Sannidhav. Through natural attraction, how iron gets drawn to magnet, he says, Tatha me bhidyate chetas chakrapaner yadrichaya. He says, similarly, my mind is drawn towards chakrapani. Chakrapani is another beautiful word for Vishnu, one who has the chakra, Sudarshana chakra in his hand, the Supreme Lord. So one who wields the chakra, which is also can be seen as symbolically the wheel of time, one who wields the wheel of time in his hands, I am drawn to him effortlessly as iron is drawn towards magnet. When this is heard, now the teachers are very angry. So they tell among themselves, bring me a cane. This boy has brought us into disrepute. We have to punish him. This is the only way. So normally there are four ways to get things done. It is said Sama, Dana, Bheda, Danda. Sama means to talk and convince someone. Dana means to give gifts and essentially placate someone. Bheda means to sow seeds of dissension, to create confusion and so on, so that one can get convinced of one's point of view. And the final is danda, means to take the stick, which is to punish. So these are the four ways that are given to get someone to one's way. So they are saying we have to now go to the fourth way, which is to take the stick, because this boy is not responding to talking and any other devices. He is proving to be a silly chap, and therefore he is bringing ruin to the whole race. He is like a thorn in the forest of Diti's sons. So Diti's sons, Daityas, headed by Hiranyakashipu, they say are like wonderful sandal trees. This is how the demons think. They think all the pleasures of the world are smelling so good and they are so beautiful. And why would a fool want to give up all this and be surrendered to the Lord? So they say you are like a thorny bush in the forest of sandal trees, and you may even become like the axe to the sandal trees in the form of Vishnu himself, cutting at the root of the forest. Therefore, we are going to punish you, and thereby intimidating him with all these threats. They again teach him, sit him like a punishment, sit him down, and teach him about dharma, artha, kama. They stay with what is righteous living, and the righteous living is only to enhance wealth accumulation and pleasures. They do not want to talk about liberation and ultimately surrender to God, any of that. They just want him to be engaged in the world primarily for wealth accumulation and sense enjoyment, so that he can grow on to be a king like his father. So now they think that he has mastered everything. So they finally he remains silent. Prahlada, after giving out these verbal truth bombs and then shocking them, he goes silent. And then when he is silent, they keep on talking about all these mundane topics, and he remains silent. So they think he has taken it inwardly. So now they are confident. So they take him to the palace again, and his mother dresses him up nicely, washes him, dresses him up, and then he is again taken to the court of Hiranyakashipu, and they are now confidently presenting him. Here is Prahlada. Now you can question him. So Prahlada is greeted with benedictions. The child also is very cultured, so he falls at the feet of the teachers and his father, and the father takes him up, puts him on his lap, and smells his head out of affection. This is a very general custom of Bharat, that when youngsters take the feet of the elders smell the head. So Hiranyakashipu does this, and he is filled with tears of joy because Prahlada is looking so beautiful, so radiant, and now he is completely convinced that Prahlada's ways have been mended. So he says, "Oh dear Prahlada, tell me, what is it that you have learned? What is the highest teaching you have learned?" And now Prahlada gives the response with the verse that is quoted so often, one of the most powerful verses. He says, "O king, this is the highest purpose of learning itself." And it is, he says, 1, to hear the names of the Lord; 2, to sing the glories of the Lord; 3, to remember the Lord; 4, to serve the lotus feet of the Lord; 5, to offer worship to the Lord; 6, to offer salutations to the Lord; 7, to be a servant of the Lord; 8, to have friendship with him; and 9, to offer one's body and mind and soul to the Lord. These 9 processes are the ways in which one can purify oneself and attain the highest perfection of life. This verse is so beautiful. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. He says these are the 9 ways. This verse has been commented upon so much because it's so powerful. It captures the entire gamut of devotional service, and Prahlada is the paragon of devotion. So This beautiful verse is commented by all the acharyas. So we again look at it carefully. Shravanam means listening, listening to the holy names of the Lord, listening to scriptures such as Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, listening to the great sages, listening to the stories of Vishnu. Kirtanam means to sing the glories of the Lord, to chant the holy names, to sing the songs glorifying the Lord. Vishnu Smaranam, to remember the Lord, to remember the Supreme Being through His names, His form, His pastimes, His holy abodes. Pada Sevanam. Pada Sevanam means to serve the lotus feet of the Lord. So, how does one serve the lotus feet of the Lord? One is, of course, to remember the form of the Lord and the lotus feet of the Lord. But the other inner meaning commented by great acharyas is that lotus feet of the Lord is nothing but all the other devotees of the Lord. The devotees who are surrendered to the Lord are at the lotus feet of the Lord. And therefore, to serve the lotus feet of the Lord is to serve all the other devotees. The great devotees who are dedicated their lives to Bhagavan, to serve them is to serve the Lord Himself. And similarly, the great rivers like Ganga and Yamuna that flow from the lotus feet of the Lord, to serve them also by taking a dip in them and honoring Ganga and honoring Tulasi, all of these is to serve the lotus feet of the Lord. Archanam is to offer deity worship. So, this is when one has a deity in the house or goes to the temple and offers proper deity worship by offering flowers and incense and all the other various articles of worship. Vandanam is to offer obeisances, to literally fall like a stick. It is said dandavat, it is said. So, to prostrate before the supreme being in the temple or in or as a deity, or also in front of great devotees themselves. Dasyam is to serve the Lord, which is to live with the attitude of serving everyone, serving the the cause of truth itself, serving the cause of perfection of life among all living entities, helping them realize their own greatness, their own perfection of unconditional love. Sakyam is to have friendship. Friendship means to treat the Lord as friend, not someone to be feared, but as one's dearest friend, beloved. And Atma Nivedanam finally is to surrender one's complete self, heart, mind, and soul, everything to the Lord. And it is said that these 9 processes, each one of them by itself is powerful. One doesn't have to engage in every one of them. Each person is constitutionally directed or attracted to one of these. And in fact, some great examples are given as paragons of each one of them. Shravanam, the very example of Shravanam or listening is Parikshit, the one who is listening to the Bhagavatam right now. As we see, he is the most avid listener. He listens with great attention. And so Parikshit represents the epitome of listening, Shravanam. Kirtanam, to sing the glories of the Lord. Shuka, the very speaker of Bhagavatam. Again, Bhagavatam being such a crown jewel of scriptures, the listener of Bhagavatam is the paragon of listening. The speaker of Bhagavatam is the paragon of one who sings the glories of the Lord. Shuka Brahma Rishi. Vishnu Smaranam, constantly abiding in remembrance of the Lord. It is none other than Prahlada himself who spoke this verse. He is the paragon of Vishnu Smaranam. Pada Sevanam, to serve the lotus feet of the Lord. Mother Lakshmi is considered the paragon of that. She is always at the feet of the Lord, massaging the lotus feet. And therefore, Mother Lakshmi is considered the paragon of Pada Sevanam. Archanam is Prithu. We saw the story of King Prithu, who was a great king who engaged in beautiful deity worship and sacrifices and so on. He is considered the paragon of Archanam or deity worship. Vandanam is Akrura. We will see the story of Akrura, the great devotee of Krishna. When he comes to Vrindavan to take Krishna, Vandanam means to fall at the feet, as we saw, to offer prostrate worship. Akrura falls at the footprints of Bhagavan on the banks of Yamuna, wherever he sees it. Even before he gets the physical darshan of Krishna, he is so devoted that he falls at the seeing the footprints of the lotus footprints of Bhagavan on the banks of Yamuna. So Akrura is the paragon of Vandanam. Dasyam, which is to have a complete attitude of servitude. Everyone probably knows the best example of that is Hanuman. Hanuman, the great servant of Ram, is the quintessential servant of the Lord, the highest exemplar of servitude. Sakyam, mood of friendship. Again, everybody knows the greatest example of this is Arjuna, who received the beautiful Bhagavad Gita from his dear friend Krishna. And finally, Atmanivedanam, giving up one's own body, mind, and soul. Bali Maharaj, who gives up his entire body to the foot of the great Trivikrama, which will again come in the 8th Skandha. He is the great example. Of course, Atmanivedanam in the highest sense is exemplified by the gopis of Vrindavan also, because the gopis of Vrindavan gave everything they had, the body, their mind, their soul, their very existence was surrendered to Krishna. So these are the 9 beautiful examples. This one verse alone has been expounded for hours, but Prahlada packs so much. Again, the verse is Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. Tan Manye Adhitam Uttamam. He says, this I consider to be the highest form of intelligence. So, intelligence is not the clever ways of the intellect to deceive and to manipulate, but to surrender and to realize and bring forth unconditional love of the Supreme Being and of all living entities. This is what Prahlada beautifully defines as intelligence. And therefore he says, this is what one has to practice, and I reckon this to be the highest form of learning. When this is said, Hiranyakashipu is now, as we can imagine, completely mad. His lips are quivering with rage, and he yells at the Brahmanas, who the two Shanda and Amarka. He says, who is it who is espousing the cause of the enemy? What is the nonsense that this child has been taught by your wicked self? It is extremely impious that such words are coming out of my mouth. So this is coming out of my son's mouth. So this is the perversion of Hiranyakashipu, that he thinks it is impious to glorify Vishnu in his presence. So he says, what is this mischief this is going on? Oh, while Brahmanas, what punishment shall I give you? So they get very scared. They say, oh, great king, we have nothing to do with this. We have been trying to teach him, but this son of yours is saying something that has been neither taught by us nor by anybody else. This seems to be in him naturally. Please curb your anger. Do not put the blame at us. We have nothing to do with this. They are petrified, scared, and they are pleading with the king, with Hiranyakashipu. When this is told by them, he turns to his son. He says, who gave you this vicious idea if this is not coming from these teachers? Tell me now. He yells at Prahlada. And Prahlada says, again, every time he speaks, it's so beautiful. He says, the mind of those who are attached to their home, attached to the sense of I and mine, it always falls into uncontrolled sense activities, and it's enjoying the same pleasure over and over. And it cannot understand surrender to the Supreme Lord Krishna. He says, these are all verses which are so quoted. Punaf punaf charvita charvanana means those who are chewing the chewed already. This is what he says is the nature of engaging in sense pleasures. Taking pleasure in the same food again and again, in the same sense objects again and again, in watching the same type of movies again and again, engaging again and again and again in the same pleasures is like chewing the cud, like dog biting the bone. Prahlada uses this expression, punaf punaf charvita charvananam, those who are always chewing what has already been chewed. He says, matir na krishne paratah swatova, their intellect can never understand Krishna, the Supreme Being. Their mind is impure and they are like the blind led by another blind, and therefore they are unable to realize Vishnu, who is the supreme object of the human life itself. On the other hand, all they are doing is they are caught by the bounden rope like animals, and they are moving around just as animals are moving in a farm, bound to a rope. They are moving around going after the same things over and over again, and such people, they cannot approach the feet of Lord Vishnu, which alone can remove evil. Because as long as one does not get the contact of the supreme devotees, he says, by being blessed with the association of those who have nothing as their own, who are completely surrendered, only this has been learned. So he gives a hint here. We will later see how the great Narada himself taught Prahlada in his womb. When Prahlada was in the womb of his mother, he was taught, and this has been hinted before, it will come in detail later. But Prahlad says, I was fortunate to be bathed in the dust of the feet of a great being. So, and he says that that alone can give this wisdom. And Hiranyakashipu asks, how did you get this wisdom? He gives an indirect answer. He says, those who are attached to, as we said, chewing the same pleasures over and over, they can never understand this. They can never surrender to Krishna. It is only by bathing in the dust of the lotus feet of surrendered devotees that such grace can come forth. Pada Rajo Abhishekam Nishkinchananam, he says. The ones who have nothing as their own, who are fully surrendered, by taking their association, again Prahlada gives the way of getting this as well, is to get association of those who are engaged in devotion, surrendered fully, satsang. So as we see, every verse of Prahlad is a teaching that can be contemplated for hours. So hearing this, Hiranyakashipu was now blinded by wrath. He throws his son down to the ground from his lap, and he is now bloodshot eyes. His eyes are red. He is full of anger, and now he is done with the boy. He has given multiple choices, multiple chances, he thought. Every time Prahlada comes back, not only not listening to him, but glorifying the Supreme Lord, who is considered by Hiranyakashipu as his very enemy. So he says, kill him right now. I am done with this boy. Kill him. I'm done with him. I don't need this boy. He is glorifying the very Vishnu who killed my brother Hiranyaksha. He is abandoning his kith and kin. He is worshipping Vishnu, who is the slayer of his very uncle. What good can turn from him? And then he says, if someone is an enemy also, if he is enemy's son rather, if he is proving to be of good value to us, we can accept him. But one's own son, if he is behaving like an enemy, we should throw him, just as we amputate a limb that is injurious to the whole body. Interestingly, Hiranyakashipu thinks Prahlada is like a limb that needs to be amputated even though it belongs to him. Interestingly, the other way around is also true. It is said that if one has a relative or a close one who is so caught in worldly ways, he has to be shunned. And Prahlad shows this here. Just as Hiranyakashipu wants to get rid of Prahlad, Prahlad has no attachment to his father, shuns him completely. And there are many such examples given. Bharata shunning his own mother, Kaikeyi, and so on. So every relation is valuable only if it's conducive to take one to the highest perfection of life. And so what Hiranyakashipu says is true in reverse too, but Hiranyakashipu says here that one ought to amputate the limb that is injurious to the whole body. Therefore, even though he is my son, let him be killed, poison the food, or do whatever it takes, kill him. So now the demons are all very happy, because the demons, they love killing, and though they were nominally respecting Prahlad, when they are given the orders to kill him, they are eager and they are chomping at the opportunity. They are looking fearful with sharp teeth and ugly faces and spikes in their hands. And they are shouting, cut him, kill him. And then they engage in all kinds of activities, but nothing affects him. Whatever they do, it is said it proved of no avail, because he was surrendered to the Supreme Lord. It says, Pare Brahmani Nirdeshye Bhagavati Akhilatmani Yuktatman Aphala Asan. Because he was surrendered in Pare Brahmani, the Supreme Being, Bhagavan, Akhilatmani, soul of the universe, whatever they did was Aphala, was fruitless. They couldn't get anything. So, what all did they do? They did all kinds of things which are unimaginable. They got elephants to run over him. But when elephants ran over him, he became like flour. Nothing affected him. They had poisonous serpents go over his body. The poison didn't affect him. They put destructive spells on him. It didn't affect him. They threw him down from mountain. He fell down like a flower. They employed conjuring tricks. They locked him up in dark caves. They gave him, force fed him poison. It didn't affect his body. It came out. They starved him. They exposed him to frost, ice, kept him in ice, they kept him in winds, they put him in fire. They literally made him sit in fire. They crushed him under rocks. They did every possible thing one can do to kill a person, and they were not able to. And then Hiranyakashipu, seeing all this and getting the report, he became very worried. He says, this boy, we have been trying to kill him in so many ways, but he is escaping unhurt. He is here completely undaunted and looks like he cannot be hurt in any way. He seems to possess some glory that I'm not able to understand. He seems literally immortal. Now I'm really afraid. So this finally strikes fear in the heart of Hiranyakashipu. The one who was invincible, who thinks everything, the whole world and heaven is under his foot, seeing that he cannot touch his little child, kill him, let alone forget killing, even lay a wound on him, he now is so afraid, his face is cast downward, and he is sitting completely morose and depressed. So now the two teachers, Shanda and Amarka, they see this and they approach the king. Now they think they need another chance because they think, having tried all these ways to kill Prahlada, nothing worked. So they think now they will employ their skills. They think through their intellect they can again somehow corrupt Prahlada. So they tell Hiranyakashipu, O king, you have nothing to worry. All the three worlds are trembling at the mere play of your eyebrows. We see nothing for you to be anxious about. Therefore, please wait. Our father, which is the big guru, Shukracharya, he is going to come back. Until then, let's keep the boy bound. And then he will anyway grow up. And when he grows up, he may change his way. So, this is the other trick played by the demoniac people of many places. Even today, we can see this where they think, and this in fact even works in some cases where even if one is, as a child, naturally inclined towards saintly qualities, they keep exposing him to social conditioning so that eventually the mind gets polluted and corrupted and they become like others. They become part of the worldly current, wanting to belong. So, this is what is the trick that they are now putting forth. Of course, with a pure soul like Prahlad, it has no chance, but it is a very valid trick, and that's what they are saying. Rather than trying to kill him, we will just condition him. So, killing his mind, they say, is more effective than killing his body, and that's what they say. So, Hiranyakashipu now accepts this proposal because the other proposal, the brute force method, didn't work. So, he says, okay, take him and teach him only that can make him a householder. So he wants him, all said and done, his son, so to get attached to his kingdom, attached to his body, attached to the life of the royal pleasures and so on. And therefore he says, teach him about how to acquire money, how to have pleasures, and all the rest. So they again teach him all this, but Prahlada did not approve of any of them that are taught by his teachers, and he remains completely unmoved by their teachings. And then one day it is said, when the teachers were away from school, there are many other boys of the demoniac class, and they are all seated there. And Prahlad was called by the boys, and all the boys, all the kids in the school, they of course have great respect for Prahlad because he looks radiant. He is also, of course, the son of the king. So they sit around him and they call him and they make merry. And when they call him and they sit around him and they ask him to talk about something, and immediately they put aside all the playthings because they have great respect for Prahlada. So all these boys who are still innocent, so it is said nicely here that these boys are all innocent because they are still very young and their judgment has not been completely corrupted. And so, even though their natural propensity may be in sense enjoyments, they still have some purity left in them. This is why it is said that the children by nature are having the innocence of heart, and it is conditioning that pollutes them. So, even the demoniac boys, they have this purity in them as a seed, and their judgment is still not corrupted. So they are very eager to listen to Prahlad. They have natural respect for Prahlad, and so they sit around Prahlad and ask him to tell them some stories or teach them something. And Prahlad, who is the great devotee of the Lord, now starts speaking. It says, Tan aha karuno maitro mahabhagavato asuraha. So Prahlada, who is an asura, that is the beautiful irony. Prahlada is born in the demoniac race. He is born to Hiranyakashipu, showing how a lotus can bloom in completely dirty waters. So he is a Mahabhagavata, great devotee. Maitro, he is a friend of all. Karuno, he is full of compassion. So with his great compassion and friendship and love and devotion, he starts speaking to teach the other demoniac boys of the highest perfection of life. And that teaching will begin in the next chapter. We've seen in this chapter already some of the most beautiful teachings of Prahlad when he tells directly his father the very purpose of life itself and the unfortunate state of those who engage in sense pleasures, chewing what is already chewed, and the various processes of devotion. So many wonderful teachings. Now, Prahlad will teach the other demoniac boys of the right way of living, which will begin with the next chapter. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.